Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Hi, folks. Cesar here again with you. Thanks for joining us. We have a great show this evening. Let's get right to it. My first guest, Lois Page. She's the co-president of the League of Women Voters here in Virginia. We're going to talk about a topic you've heard me talk about, actually several. We're going to talk about some voter frauds. We're going to talk about constitutional amendments, bonds, meal taxes, all sorts of stuff. Lois, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have a lot to talk about.
Oh, yes.
In a short amount of time.
Right,
So
right.
Where do we start? Where do you want to get going on this?
Well, one of my current favorite topics is the whole issue of the alleged voter conspiracy, rigged elections, fraud.
It's in the news.
In the news.
Yeah.
And to me, this is especially dangerous. It undermines the nation's confidence in this system that is so crucial to democracy.
Sure.
And I've done some looking at various experts who talk about how impossible it is to rig an election. I mean, first of all, nationwide, you would have to somehow get both parties to collude in every state to swing an election one way or the other. And if you just take it from just Virginia's perspective, for example, registering to vote is, first of all, if you don't tell the truth on the registration form, it's a felony.
Sure.
Second of all, the registrars, who are really dedicated public service, they want this to work right, and they have a number of cross-checking databases with registering in other states and so on that catch right away if there's an issue with that. Then on the next level, and I should add that Virginia's registration system has received nationwide awards for its efficiency.
So let's just backtrack a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So just so everyone's aware, the governors of the state get to appoint the election chiefs at the polls, and if it's a Republican, they appoint Republicans. If it's Democrat, they tend to appoint Democrats.
Yes.
Right? That's just how the system works.
Right.
But underneath them are all these volunteers or public servants that would have to also be part of the conspiracy, right?
Exactly, and they are from both parties too, every step of the way. And in fact, you go to an individual precinct, the chief election officer is from one party, and the assistant chief is from the other.
That's right. So they're watching each other.
They are watching it. There are poll watchers there from both parties, checking it out.
Now, this is something the League of Women Voters is passionate about.
Oh, absolutely.
You're nonpartisan.
That is correct.
So your focus is basically to make sure, in the spirit of voting, in the spirit of democracy, things happen the way they should.
Exactly.
So, in your experience, you've seen widespread fraud or not?
No. And I actually have worked at the polls a number of years, so I see this happen. And my husband right now is working at the CAP Center, working with absentee ballots. So I have firsthand knowledge of how many cross-checks there are.
So where's this coming from? I mean, are you familiar with a very nice gentleman of the name of Hans von Spafkowski?
Yes, I recall that he has, in Fairfax and a number of other places, has made charges of voter fraud. I think he probably was the architect of the original photo ID legislation and across in the number of states that have passed that. And speaking of photo ID, that is an interesting thing. When I work at the polls, a lot of people come in and say, "Oh, I'm so glad they have photo ID." But the only thing that a photo ID at the polls is preventing is somebody coming in and impersonating one of their neighbors. And when you're at the polls, you're at the school gym, all of the people from your neighborhood are there. If you're pretending to be someone else, they would probably notice.
Or if they're voting, and that's the thing, The precinct is the neighborhood.
Exactly.
So most people that volunteer kind of have been doing it for a while.
That's right.
There's very few new people, and they get trained. And if I know in my town, in Herndon, it's a very tight town. The precincts at the community center. We know who's at a funeral. We know who's voting. I mean, we kind of would figure that stuff out,
Yes, right.
as I would imagine most neighborhoods would.
I think there's some figure that they've only discovered 3 in millions.
I saw it, 31 in a billion votes cast. Since 2000. There were a billion votes cast, 31 cases where someone tried to impersonate.
And they get caught.
They do get caught.
They get caught. And so then we come to the whole thing of counting the ballots. How would there be fraud there? Well, I've watched the sealed election machine come in. It's opened with great fanfare and all sorts of straps and tapes and so on. And then we have, fortunately in Fairfax, not all over the state yet, but it's coming, this paper ballot system. And a lot of people come in to the polls and they say, isn't that going backwards? But the truth is the paper ballot is a record. Yeah. It's the paper trail. Right. And and they have been known to have to go back and count them one by one. So
that's the other
recently
thing people don't.
even. Yeah.
I've seen it. I've been, and what's amazing when they bring in all the canisters and boxes that have been sealed and sent to verify and validate the election, both parties have representation in those.
In fact, they're huddling over the counting.
Right.
They
so
really are.
So again, people that are claiming fraud, there would have to be a conspiracy from the very beginning. At the election chief level, at the chief, assistant, and chief.
Of 2 different parties.
2 different parties. At the registration or the checking process, where they're allowing anyone to check in multiple times.
But they're in an electronic poll book, and once they have voted, you push a button and they voted, and they try to come back.
Which in some cases are also backed up by the paper poll book, which some precincts have both of. So it's not consistent. I'll give someone that.
Fairfax is definitely an advanced system, and we're fighting in Virginia to get it all over the state.
So there would have to be a coordinated effort.
Yes, exactly.
And then people actually casting ballots multiple times under different names. Is it worth going to jail? Is it worth? I mean, it's a major felony.
It is a felony, exactly. So.
But where does it come from? I mean, again, getting back to this notion of institutionalizing photo ID, checks, challenging people at the polls. I mean, that's.
If it might serve to kind of depress the turnout. If people feel like this is a corrupt system, so I'm just going to opt out of it. But of course, the only way to make sure your vote doesn't count is to not vote. So I'd strongly recommend everybody to vote. And my sense of it is that right now and maybe it's been fueled by this, is that a huge increase in the number of absentee ballots being cast. The first day of the polls, the absentee, in-person absentee voting was opened, I went to the Springfield Government Center and the line was out the door.
Really?
Yeah.
This is early. Well,
it's not early
absentee.
Yes, in-person absentee, and I had to do that because I'm working at the polls.
So for the folks at home, we don't call it early voting because you're not allowed to vote early in Virginia.
Right.
So you vote early absentee.
Yeah. And of course you have to have one of the 19 reasons.
And this is what my litigation that I filed was about.
Yeah.
So you had to swear and affirm one of the 19 reasons why you needed to vote early.
Yeah.
And under penalty of something
or another,
So.
And a favorite topic of the league is to no excuse absentee voting.
Correct.
We have been lobbying that for years, and I spoke with my own legislator who said, well, then we'd have to advertise earlier if we had everybody voting. So there you go.
Well, it would encourage and allow people to vote, more people to vote. That was sort of my assessment of when you give people the option.
Yeah, and they don't have to worry about whether they had the right rule or the right reason why. They would do it more often.
So you all have advocated no reason,
no excuse needed.
Right, because that's right. There was
just vote absentee if you want to,
or just vote early.
Or vote early, whatever you want.
That always escaped me.
Yeah.
I mean, we couldn't vote early. But I had to cast that ballot that said absentee on it. So it was, to me, there was a risk and a concern in that some of those people that came in to vote on election day that cast the provisional ballot, there was a separate process for them. Some people would not have the right precinct
or the right ID, or the ID, and so on.
So the provisional was then cast.
Yes, and then usually it involves going to the government center within a certain period of time to bring whatever you needed to bring.
See, and when I, as chair, filed litigation, we were offering to represent that voter. Because Mr. Von Skowski didn't like that, because, see, when you work for a living and you're taking off time to go vote,
yes, exactly,
and then there's an issue, then you have to go back and vote. So if an attorney can represent you in a court, why couldn't an attorney represent you at the provisional ballot hearing? So that was another thing that I thought, we are really making it difficult for people to vote.
Exactly. And why would we do that?
Because again, I'm still trying to understand where the notion that there is widespread vote. I will grant you that there are errors or people on the registrars that should not be there.
Yes.
They've either passed on, they've moved.
And I think the whole voter registration part of the picture probably needs updating and modernizing, and maybe the answer is automatic voter registration. As soon as you turn 18 and you get a driver's license or interact in any way with the government agency, why you are automatically registered unless you opt out, and then we,
That would be great.
Yeah.
Lois, we're going to be back in the next section, folks, so stay with us.
Hi, I am Peggy Knight, and I'm with the League of Women Voters of the Fairfax area, and I'm here to share information about Election Day with the viewing audience of the Fairfax Public Access Television area. Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Do you know that you can vote for more than just the president and the vice president? Every representative in Congress is up for election this year. But that's not all you can vote for on Election Day. There are 2 proposed constitutional amendments for Virginia. There is a meal tax referendum, and there are 3 separate bonds to vote on. For more information about these issues and the candidates, go to vote411.org. Remember, Election Day is November 8th, and your vote is your voice, and every vote counts.
There's more than just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me.
there's more than just books at the library.
Il y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
Hello. You have a lot of great books here today. You know there's more than just books at the library.
I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar here. Thanks for coming back. With Lois Page. She is the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Virginia. Thanks for coming back. We have more stuff to talk about. Constitutional amendments, meals tax.
Yes.
What else can we cover?
Oh, we can cover everything.
Yeah, so how's that going? How's the, which topic do you want to tackle first?
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about these constitutional amendments because
these are statewide.
Statewide amendments changing the Constitution of Virginia. They've gone through the 2 sessions of the legislature.
And for the folks
voted.
at home, constitutions are organic documents, in my opinion.
Right.
We can amend them. There's nothing sacred about them. So for
that
the
is true.
purists out there.
But on the other hand, they are not codes of law. They are general principles, and that's kind of one of the issues I'd like to mention.
I like guidelines.
Okay. The first one is one that's called the Right to Work Amendment. And I've had several people ask me, what on earth is this? But what it is the right to work law means an employee has a right to work for an employer without being a member of a union, but gets the benefit of the union's negotiations for improvements without paying union dues. Right to work bans making union membership a condition of employment. If you vote yes on this ballot question, you are voting for adding this amendment to the Constitution. And if you vote no, of course, you're against adding it to the Constitution. The proponents of the amendment say that it would ensure that future General Assemblies cannot easily change that state's right to work law. And a constitutional amendment approved at an election shows the direct will of the people, not just that of legislators. However, opponents say that we have had a right to work law in Virginia for 60 years.
Sure.
60 years. And a constitutional amendment is just simply not needed. How else
is it enforced? How else is it implemented, if that's not the case?
You mean it without a right to work law?
Correct.
I don't know. I assume that in a union shop, you have to be a union member or pay union dues.
Right, but there are people that don't.
Yes.
Because of this. So just for the people at home, let's spell this out. So let's say you're a group, you have an organization, and there are union dues paying members. Someone could come in and not contribute to the dues of the membership, the association, yet still benefit from all the bargaining benefits,
lobbying and so on. Yeah.
So,
and that's what we have now.
Oh, I know.
That's exactly what we have.
But that's what we're talking. So for the folks at home, that's where we are today. This would change that. This would alter that.
No. It would make it. It would simply put it in the Constitution instead of just in the legal code. So it would make it harder any time in the future to make any changes.
So you all are voting no.
Oh, we actually don't have a study on this. We're just trying to give both sides. So we haven't studied this and don't have a position, which is very important in the league world.
Sure. So for folks at home, if you think you want to institutionalize the right to work, support that. If you don't, then don't vote for it.
Yeah, or you think it's sufficient to have it in the legal code and it doesn't need to be in the Constitution. Yeah. Now the other ballot question is it's called a tax relief amendment. It allows an option to localities to exempt from taxation the real property of the surviving spouse of any law enforcement officer, firefighter, search and rescue personnel, or emergency medical service personnel who was killed in the line of duty, where the surviving spouse occupies the real property as his or her principal place of residence and has not remarried. So vote yes for this means you would add this to the Constitution. This would be an amendment to the Constitution, and likewise a vote no would keep it out of the Constitution. Proponents say it recognizes the hardships to families as a result of the death of those who served to protect Virginians. And it is established at the option of localities, thus it is not considered an unfunded mandate. Opponents say this could result in reduced revenue for a locality. This is, you can't collect property tax from these people. For
in perpetuity, as long as it's in the family, or that spouse only?
That spouse only.
Okay.
Yeah. There are some, when the legislature was considering this, there are some unanswered questions, like, you know, if the person was killed in the line of duty in some other state, does it still count in Virginia? And apparently it does. And this is another question of, should this be in the Constitution?
Yeah,
so that's the other con of that.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the amendments.
Okay. Thank you for that. Let's talk local.
Yes.
Local.
Yes. Local.
I see this here. I don't know if the folks, maybe with the screen, vote yes, meals tax.
Yeah.
Okay. So pros and cons. I have my own opinion on this.
Okay.
I'd love to hear what.
Well, the pro of this is, and I should say this, we do have a position on this. Fairfax League is very much in favor of this tax, because we feel, like it was recently mentioned in the Post, that Fairfax is kind of fraying around the edges. We're searching for additional funds to support our schools and services that we've long taken for granted, but because of various and sundry reasons, our revenues have not kept up with the need. And we, as a county, are at a disadvantage as compared to cities, because cities can sort of introduce a tax like this meal tax without a referendum, but counties have whole different rules in this state, and it's called the Dillon rule.
Thank you, Richmond.
Yes, and it's all concentrated in Richmond, and we had to get permission just to have put this up for a vote from the state legislature.
So people in Richmond believe in states' rights, just not county rights.
There you go.
Okay, I just want to make sure I got that.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
A meals tax, a 4% tax that is estimated to bring in $100 million.
So again, just so I'm clear, so the con is that will be passed on to the consumer.
Yes.
Not this time. So now, for the folks at home, when I go out to eat now, I'll see an extra 4%.
That's right.
On my check.
Yes.
Because
you would.
The organization, restaurant's not going to pay for it. They're going to pass it on to the consumer.
Right, right.
So now, 4%, another nickel for every dollar, 4 cents. Let's call it a nickel, because I don't like pennies. So I'm going to pay a nickel anyway.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to take it out of the waitress or waiter. So,
I hope not.
But for that extra nickel, I get what?
You get $70 million going to schools.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
I support public schools. We have great public schools in Fairfax County.
We do, but we are sort of in a position right now of being the training ground to send, a lot of our teachers are now leaving Fairfax County once they've kind of enjoyed the
because we don't pay them because we don't have money.
Well, exactly. We actually pay our teachers $15,000 less than Arlington.
Really?
Yep. And ironically, Arlington, Alexandria, Falls Church, Fairfax City, Herndon, and Vienna, and DC all have a meals tax. And here we are sitting in the middle of them with no meals tax. And so the question is, do you worry about that when you go out to eat? Did I cross the line into Fairfax City? And I don't think so. And yet, we're kind of paying for their kids.
Who's really against it? Because help me break down the board of supervisors, because this is they have to they're either supporting it or not supporting, or just staying
Well,
silent on it? Or?
the anti-tax people are going to not be in favor of this. There's no, I've heard an argument that, well, we can figure out some other way to get this money. We just have to get more money out of Richmond to support our schools, but that hasn't worked too well.
Richmond's not the House makeup and the Senate.
And they're already, they were going to raise teacher salaries, but their budget isn't balanced. They've had setbacks with the state budget, and the raises for teachers are now being called back. So we just don't have any other sources. We can't. We have property tax, a few permits and fees, and that's kind of it. And if we don't do this, we will see we'll have to continue seeing an increase in our property tax. We just will. I mean, the Fairfax League is able to sit in on budget, has actually a presentation by the county budget people every spring, and that budget is tight. Yeah. It is tight, and I'm convinced that the schools have cut the class sizes have gone up, and I'm convinced that they are definitely in need. Not just.
So I think this is far more, if I can say, palatable.
Yes.
Sorry, I've been waiting.
Go ahead, say that.
Then the property. First of all, there are a lot of people that are on fixed income, retired. A property tax it hurts.
Yeah.
But if you have disposable income, you're going to Morton's, Ruth Chris, you're going to Gilbert Francois, you're going to this. There's a segment of people that I know that go out, I don't think really will be affected either way by meals tax.
I agree. And
then I'm thinking, okay, that segment, the other segment, they might think about it, another 5%. So maybe they get the large instead of the extra large thing of French fries. I've heard the different sides. I have not heard a good reason to be against it.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the restaurant people are convinced that I think it's an extra hassle for them. To deal with that tax. I don't know. I mean, I get.
Well, I was out last night, and someone approached me against this, and I explained, well, you're against the benefits that we discussed here.
Yeah.
Teachers.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Wanted some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about ripped off money. Nothing very nice. Homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home?
When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water. At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site. That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff. You know what the best part is?
What?
More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent. Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar here. Thanks for coming back. My next guest is Beth Tudon, the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of the Fairfax area. We're going to talk about something pretty important to a lot of folks, about guns in general, gun safety. But Beth, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about, first and foremost, this. You have a screening with expert panels.
Yes.
Narrated by Katie Couric, I understand. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So there's a film that was produced last year called Under the Gun. It's a documentary, and it really traces what's happened in the United States. It gets into some of the mass shootings, but also some of the and the impacts that things have on the family. So it gets into some of the violence that's happened in Chicago. So some things with various kinds of guns, but all sorts of violence. There's certainly suicides. There are 33,000 gun deaths a year in the U.S., so much more than other industrialized countries. But it kind of goes through a timeline. So Katie Couric narrates it. It's very powerful. And then it also gets into the issues, too, about why hasn't something been done with automobiles? We've improved safety so much with seat belts, airbags, things like that, but we really haven't with guns. And they're lethal, they kill someone, they can kill again, they don't die. But so what can we do? And it also looks at the CDC research, or the fact that they can't do research. It looks at the ATF, and that they have these railroad cars, the railroad boxes in, I believe it's West Virginia, where they're storing all of their documents. And that's just one flood or fire away from destroying that. And yet Congress has prevented research. So you talk about government efficiency, but Congress passed a bill that was signed into law that prevents that kind of research, and because they don't want a gun registry. So it makes it very difficult to trace guns.
So this is why, folks, elections matter, right? When you have people that, first of all, I think there's a direct correlation with one's lifestyle, where they live, with what laws are accepted on this topic.
Right.
I think if you're from the denser areas of the country, you kind of get why you don't want everyone to carry a bazooka, right? And you get the reason why it's important, like driving a car, or operating anything, that it's necessary to be trained at least. That's, I'm a volunteer reserve deputy sheriff. They trained us on how to handle firearms. But that's not the case for people that go to gun shows and buy things.
That's exactly right.
Online. So
yes,
there's to your point, there's a lot of areas that can be addressed, but Congress won't even allow them to be discussed.
Exactly, right.
So that is frustrating for a lot of people.
Right. So we have 300 million guns in this country.
One for every man, woman, and child.
That's right. And we have, but now research is showing that fewer and fewer people are owning guns, but people who do own guns own more. So the problem.
I'm okay with that as long as they're reasonable?
Right, right.
I mean, who's arguing against this?
Right. Well, and yeah, I mean, there are lots of antique guns. I don't know if you've ever been to the NRA museum. They have a free museum you don't have to pay for, but they have this little tiny gun there, and it's kind of interesting. So we're not trying to get rid of the Second Amendment. There's a narrative that is developed that either you're for the Second Amendment or you're against it.
It's
that you want to
thinking.
you want to get rid of all guns. You want to take away everyone's rights. But that's not what that we're trying to do. What we want to do is raise awareness and really talk about what will work, because children are dying. FCPS has had a cluster of suicides. There was one school in Fairfax County that had 7 suicides in 3 years. And in 2014, there were 16 teen suicides in Fairfax County. So FCPS called the CDC in to research that. Now, they couldn't have researched so much gun violence, but they could research suicides. But anyway, so we do have a problem in Fairfax County with that. Guns are the primary, they're the primary vehicle for homicide or suicide in Fairfax County. And obviously across the nation, and you're right, there are rural areas where the reasons to have a gun are very different than you would in a more urban area.
I'm trying to understand, and hopefully this film,
so we have the panel,
and the panel discussion kind of touches on some of these issues. What is driving? First of all, I get someone has the right to own as many firearms as possible, and I get that they certainly are entitled to that. I'm not sure that it's a blanket sort of open season for anyone without passing any type of background. I mean, you hear people that are on the terrorist watch no-fly list can still walk into gun shows and purchase.
They can go to the dullest gun shows, and there are people who are private sellers there.
Why is that still, I mean, what's the rationale that you all hear that is a good thing? Because I don't get it.
I don't get it either.
Okay.
I don't know that people say it's private enterprise or that sort of thing. But there are people who, there are ways that people are skirting the laws. And so you have federally licensed gun dealers. They are, for the most part, above board, legitimate. They do their background checks. They do not sell to people who they are suspicious of. For instance, in Orlando, there was someone, the Orlando shooter wanted to buy a lot of armor. And the man realized, no, we're not going to sell this to him, and called but didn't have the information about who he was. So those, for the most part, 99% of those, the federally licensed gun dealers are great, but the ones who either are just selling anyway, or the private sellers, the secondhand sellers, guns are stolen and then they're resold. So the film gets into, in Chicago, that every child knows where you can go get the gun. They may not know how to go get, something nourishing, that they can't go get that, but they can go find a gun. And they had someone selling guns for $25 a pop out of the back of the car. And yet that's, why that's not being prevented more. So there's an armslist.com where people can buy guns online. I believe it's just within a state. I don't know a whole lot about it, but that's something that people, there's probably a lot of illegal gun sales. And if I could say something about the panel.
Absolutely. Sure.
So we're going to have this film on Thursday evening, and that's at the McLean Community Center.
Start time?
In the theater at 7 p.m.
Yep.
And so the film is a little more than an hour and a half, and then after that we're going to have a panel. And so it's Matt Bennett, who has worked at Brookings Institution. He is now one of the founders of the Third Way, which is a DC think tank. And he's worked with really gun violence prevention. So he worked after the Columbine mass shootings, and he has served as an advisor to the Sandy Hook families. And also Peter Reed, who is a retired Air Force officer, went to the Air Force Academy. His daughter was killed at Virginia Tech. He can say he has fired all sorts of guns. He knows them inside and out, but he wants to really get to the, what we can do to kind of find some common ground. We're not going to be able to prevent every bit of violence, but if we can reduce it, if we can prevent children from getting access to guns, because we have, as I'm sure you've heard, a toddler a week in the U.S. either shooting themselves or shooting someone else because someone just leaves a gun out. And it's unsecured, and most people, gun owners, they agree with us that everyone should store their guns safely, that there should, the child locks and have them in a gun safe. You do not just leave them on a coffee table or under a pillow or something like that, because children get them. They get under the seat of a car or something, and children find them. But in the film, they also ask children, where are the guns? And the children always know in the house where they are. So anyway, we definitely want to have a conversation about it and try to figure out what can we do.
Have you all, obviously it's lobbying, but with the makeup of, especially at the state, the federal level, that Congress isn't going to hear anything. Right, that Congress.
Right.
And
so a lot of it's going state by state.
Yeah,
so
okay.
Washington State is passing some things. There's something right now, and California has some ballot initiatives. But in California, the public can vote to put something on the ballot. They can petition, rather. Whereas in Virginia, we don't have that right. The General Assembly has to decide, which is how they can decide right now that the constitutional amendments on the ballot. We cannot do that as Virginians, but other states are doing it. So we are, with the League, we have our segments. We have the Education Fund, where we just do voter registration and anything about voters, but we do have the General Fund where we can do more advocacy. So we have developed a position to look at it and to look at what's happening with domestic violence, because that is a huge indicator of future problems. And we were instrumental in getting the first law passed in many years in Virginia that went into effect this year about domestic violence and if they have a permanent order and that
Explain
sort of
that a little bit to the folks. If you have a history or prior.
Right. So it is, I don't know this extremely well, but from what I understand, so if you have a history, if you have a conviction, then you can...
The battery, abuse.
Right. And a restraining order, a permanent restraining order, then you were supposed to give up your guns.
Correct. That was a huge win, by the way.
Yes.
I remember when that came out, so congrats on that. But to me, when I heard that, I thought, really? This isn't already in place.
Right.
And that's, so again, for the folks at home, elections matter.
Right.
And if your representative somehow is more cavalier, I hate to use that, but
yes.
I mean, then you maybe want to think about that, because this issue does affect you even if you don't own guns or don't want to own guns.
Right, because everyone is touched by this. We have so much violence here, 33,000 deaths a year.
Yeah. I saw a stat where it took all the developed nations, Europe, Japan, Germany, and it took all these, and they added up the population of those countries with the U.S. So let's say it was 300 million people.
Yes.
Of all those other countries, I think there were like 150 deaths last year by guns.
Yes.
In the U.S., it was like 30,000.
Yes. That's right. That's exactly right.
Well, I hope you have a great turnout for this.
Oh,
Again,
thank
this
you.
is
Thursday, October 27th.
At the McLean Community Center, so please be there, folks. And we will be back with our next segment.
Around the world, 1 out of every 3 women will be beaten or otherwise abused in their lifetime, often by a family member or loved one. A future free from violence. It's all she's ever wished for.
Did you know you have the power to stop children from joining gangs? You can help a father find a job and home for his family. You can assist a woman who can't afford the medicine she needs to live and the home she can't live without. You can choose to make a difference in our community. Support Volunteers of America, and you can help improve the lives of nearly 2 million Americans each year with programs and services that help individuals and families overcome their challenges to become as independent as possible. Support the programs that are working in our community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
For some folks, saving for the future is easy, but for you, it might take a little more effort. Saving for your future is your responsibility, and there's a lot to save for.
I never thought of that.
Like your child's education, perhaps uncovered medical expenses, or just to be sure you can live the way you want when you retire. The time is now to save for tomorrow. Save now or work forever. The choice is yours. Choose to save.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar back here with you. Surprise, I'm coming on camera too then. Okay, my next guest. You probably have heard of John Calhoun, or know him as I do, Jack Calhoun. He is the CEO of Hope Matters and a bunch of other stuff. I won't even try to rattle off because we don't have a lot of time. Welcome back to the show.
It feels great. It's good to be back here. Thank you, Cesar.
You heard our previous
segment.
We've talked about that painfully.
We have.
Many a times. Mm-hmm. Slow process.
Yes, indeed. A few cracks here and there, like around domestic violence.
A little bit.
So
slowly,
a little bit.
How are you doing? What are you up to?
Well, I've just written a book, Hope Matters, The Untold, really lighting paths to safer communities, stronger families.
I'm sure gun control is one of those aspects.
It was one of the chapters about a very successful strategy in California, given the context.
Yeah, tell us about it. Yeah.
Well, actually, it's very personal because it was done by my sister, who shares the same genetic defect as I, which is terminal public service. And she worked a lot with teenagers, some of whom were gunshot victims. And the one chapter in the book talks about how she trained these kids in public policy, and they were all street kids, they were all kids who were victims of gun violence, and two real successes. One, she had them off the street, digging into policy, doing research, practicing testimony. And during the hearings up in Sacramento, there were very august testimony from researchers, from this, from that, and I've testified a lot, and you usually get a fairly catatonic stare.
Yeah.
You know, they're doing the ball scores in their laps. And these kids came in wheelchairs, colostomy bags, broken spines, and gave their testimonies about what it meant to be a gunshot victim. She also has them going into high schools. She got the California Peace Prize for that because California at that time passed some of the most stringent gun control legislation, magazine limits, assault weapon bans. Absolutely extraordinary. So the book focuses on programs that work, but it's not written as a Harvard or MIT case study. It's written through the eyes of those who started it, who conceived of it, who dreamed it, and those who are the beneficiaries. Hence the title, Policy Walking. I want to inspire people. I want to move the feet.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. How's it being received? I mean, have you
done a bit
of a tour? Or
I've spoken a bit on it. I got back from LA. I was in Philadelphia last week. I guess what's most heartening to me is being bought by people close to the ground doing the work. The city of San Jose just bought 150 copies for all folks dealing with kids on the edge and fragile communities. And it ranges, and these are programs that have proven to work. I mean, the numbers are there too. But there's always a story embedded. I mean, I was in a car in West Oakland near the Coliseum with Billy Dupes and Jay Jimenez, who were doing street work, 11:30 at night. I'm dressed somewhat like this. And they said, man, you got the wrong clothes for gang work. You got to get new threads. And they said, what do you drive? I said, I drive a Subaru. They said, man, you got the wrong car. You got to get a lowrider with Hot Wheels. And I said, if you guys are so good, Cesar's got his boys on the corner. What's the first thing you say? And they said, hey, loved one. I said, what? He said, hey, loved one, or hey, nephew. So they begin with the language of claim first, before fixing. And I asked these guys, and it's in the chapter, why does it work? And Kevin Grant, who runs it, it's called Cure Violence program. It's all over the country. He said, everybody starts with fixing you. You don't have your GED, you can hardly read, you don't have a job, your dad's in jail. He said, you gotta walk with them first. You gotta walk. And then we work on the stuff. But man, you come in and all they feel is bad. And so,
makes sense.
They've had extraordinary,
makes perfect sense.
You know, the language of claim.
Sure.
You're okay. then let's start. So that's actually the opening chapter, Hey Loved One, which you don't normally read in fairly august case studies.
Oh, absolutely. It's establishing the trust first.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let me then graduate to a trusted advisor.
Yeah.
Right. So and that's not, for most people in that situation, that's not given freely.
You got it.
It is earned over time, over sweat equity.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, I get it. I absolutely get it. Well, tell me more. What were some of the revelations you had, maybe, coming from?
Well, that was certainly one, and just kind of a segue, just the way you picked up on the trust issue, the whole issue of police community trust, which is absolutely huge. And there's a chapter in here on some of that. Now, the research isn't in, but some of the cities seem to be operating on 3 levels in this. One is, I would describe as the relational. Shop with a cop, toys with a cop, Coca-Cola with a cop. In one city, I think it's Memphis, plant trees with a cop. There's an Open Up program, I think it's also there, called Open Up. And then cops knock on the door, and they're standing there with groceries. So the relational. And then there are specific programs like bicycle patrol, like VIP, coaching, mentoring. And then there's the structural, academy training, not just hook 'em and book 'em, but implicit bias, de-escalation of force, mental health issues, because a lot of these cops are dealing with mental health issues.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
well, that's what happens when you close the mental institutions, right?
Exactly.
These people don't have the support structure. It falls to local jails and police to deal with them.
You got it. And in some places, I think Oakland, they have clinicians riding with the police in the case where they say this is a mental health issue. So that's a structural change. And they're having a very hard time with recruitment. And what's coming out is not only are people scared, especially in minority communities, police are scared. I mean, as I came over here, going to Merrifield the other day, a cop had pulled somebody over, and he was on the on the passenger side, and he had his gun half out, and the person was reaching for the registration, but the cop didn't know. He was pulling out a registration or a gun. Now, admittedly, there have been horrible situations, and cops have done horrible things in the history of racial prejudices there. But on the same time, they are scared.
Sure.
And they are having a very hard time now getting recruits. And so there's a big push now.
The trust is broken down between community, law enforcement, and I'm not really sure where it all started, but it's gotten worse over the years. And I'm not sure how that gets resolved, because you're dealing with human beings after all. Right? And self-preservation's pretty strong amongst all people. I think we need to certainly educate our police a little bit more, but we need to pay them more, because I looked at sort of the pay scales. It's a lot to risk your life for the salaries that they get, quite frankly.
There's a wonderful one in Watts, I mean, you know California, in the roughest part of LA, experimental program which has cut crime by over 50%. The police are co-screened and hired by the community. They get a higher pay. They have to commit for 5 years, and they're judged. They're evaluated and promoted, not just on arrests, but on the amount of community contacts and the quality. And the citizens are part of the evaluation. But what's also happened is the community has ponied up, as they know these cops and what they're going through, say, we got to do more as parents, as faith leaders, as teachers, fill in the blank.
Ownership.
And togetherness. It's a community I care about, as opposed to I just ride through.
Now, do some of those police officers live in those communities?
For this one, they have to.
Yeah.
They have to.
Okay.
That's huge. You hit a key point. As opposed to this.
It's my neighborhood. I live here. I know people. Right? I mean, that's ownership.
And the cops are saying now they wave. It used to be a single fingered wave. Now it's a wave. And they want their kids to meet the cop, and they said it's amazing. And in Salinas, Chief McMillan had 2 guys posted in a youth center. In a youth center. That was their spot in the Hebron area, the most violent area of Salinas. And they went knocking on doors, introducing themselves. I'm Officer so-and-so. What can I do? And it can be everything from that street light's broken, or have you seen the stop sign that's broken? And in that Hebron area, crime plummeted, and reporting went up.
Sure.
Reporting went up.
People aren't afraid to report things to the police.
Yeah.
They're there to take care of them.
So there's a lot.
By the way, the people that put on that uniform, I have the utmost respect for.
So do I.
I mean, but every citizen should feel that. Every citizen should feel safe about asking for help from a person in uniform. And that's just, that needs to happen again. I'm not sure where it got fouled, but we as a country, as a community, need to rebuild that.
Yeah, and there's a history of black-brown policing that's not too noble. But
you're talking to a Latina that was with his African-American friend, got stopped when I drove a Lexus.
Driving while black in a Lexus.
Well, it was driving while brown. It was us. We were like, yes, sir, this is my car.
Right.
It was weird, but...
But you're seeing now a lot of law enforcement leaders who are black and brown.
Yeah.
California, Boston, a number of cities, but they found often some of the same difficulties with ethnic officers. So it comes down a lot to training, a lot to training.
And trust too. I mean, let's face it, the police need to also not be in, I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to fear for your life every day. When you put on that uniform, you are a target.
Yeah.
I mean,
say goodbye to your wife. Am I coming home?
Yeah, that is, quite frankly, we as a community need to have our police feel safe as well.
Exactly.
Right. So, but I do like this initiative you're talking about. Jack, gosh, the time is up.
Well, I just got here.
You got to get you back here.
I only did 2 chapters.
Oh, well, look, we're going to let you do more. You got to come back. I know the folks love you out there. I love having you. So
you're great, man.
Thank you, sir.
And thanks for your questions.
Absolutely. Folks, thanks for coming back. We'll catch you in the future. Thanks again.